talk about Kamala.
Blackberry news. Politics. Blackberry news. Pop culture. Blackberry news. Sports. Blackberry news. Justice.
So your girl Kamala Harris has been on this book tour to promote her book, where she essentially just says, I didn't do anything. This whole election was lost because nobody would let me do anything and everybody else is to blame. She did take a moment, though, to say this.
A tyrant. We used to compare the strength of our democracy to communist dictators. That's what we're dealing with right now, Donald Trump. And these titans of industry are not speaking up.
I'm going to play for you one more time.
A tyrant. We used to compare the strength of our democracy to communist dictators. That's what we're dealing with right now, Donald Trump.
This woman... So, communism is a political and economic ideology that advocates for a classless society. Okay? Ideally, the major means of production are owned by the people. Everybody is a part of it. Now, have we seen communist dictators? Yes. Is Donald Trump a communist dictator? No. Is authoritarianism communist? No. Can there be communist authoritarians? Yes. Is there a Venn diagram of overlap between communism and fascism? There can be. However, Donald Trump is not a communist dictator. And I think it's really important to make this distinction when you have his administration actively trying to sell the concept that leftists are violent. And this is an American tradition, an effort to undermine the tenets of socialism as a means of governance, as a valid means of governance. Now, when you see Kamala Harris sit up there and not only fail to properly define communism, not only to fail to properly identify what Donald Trump is, because she said that without using the term fascism. They're so afraid to use the term fascist that they would literally misrepresent him using a term that they deem demonic and problematic because they are so committed to capitalism. Democracy sustains capitalism, she said. Capitalism thrives in democracy. And right now we are dealing with, as I called him at my speech on the eclipse, a tyrant. We used to compare the strength of our democracy to communist dictators. That's what we're dealing with right now in Donald Trump. And these titans of industry are not speaking up. It needs to be made abundantly clear that she is here promoting capitalism. And so many of you have now come to understand that capitalism is that which is suppressing any level of our ability to exist on this earth without climate change, just completely dismantling it. Capitalism is what has all of these folks, migrants, coming to the United States because their countries are being destabilized. Capitalism is what has you paying damn near $1 million for groceries and gas and not being able to own a home and not being able to live off of a check-to-check system. That is capitalism doing that. She is here supporting a billionaire class. She is here supporting the elevation of individuals solely based on money. That is who y'all wanted me to be endorsing? That is who y'all are still saying would not be a problem? Trump is not communist. Communism is the opposite of fascism. Trump is a fascist.
And these titans of industry are not speaking up.
Let's get a definition of what a fascist is from Charles McBride.
Never call somebody a fascist unless you know precisely what that word means. I do know precisely what that word means. So when people come at me for calling other people fascists, they usually come unprepared. So when is it appropriate to call someone a fascist? Great question. And the answer is when they exhibit worldviews and perspectives that are aligned with historical fascist movements. Before we go any further, it's probably helpful to define fascism, which is something that nobody in these conversations ever seems to do, which is why they get so emotionally heated. Fascism is a form of palingenetic ultra-nationalism. Now that word palingenetic comes from palingenesis, the idea of a national rebirth. Fascism is obsessed with a cult of national purity and an idea of a mythic golden past that must be returned to through a form of national rebirth. The nation, which is imagined to be humiliated and threatened on the international stage, must be reborn through a broad-based revolutionary nationalist movement that defines itself against the backdrop of political gridlock and rejects both liberal reformism and leftist class struggle. Are you tracking with me so far? Fascism is a style of politics, not a form of government. It is a process, not an end result. While fascism tends to end with jackbooted thugs in the night and boxcars to Dachau or slit trenches in Treblinka, it usually starts as a protest movement inside a broader conservative coalition. A conservative commenter recently replied to one of my posts and said, in I think a way that was tongue-in-cheek, do you think every conservative is a fascist? Could you point to any conservatives who are not fascists, or is that a label that you apply to all of them? And the answer is yes. Throughout history, there have been thousands of conservatives who are not fascists. There are many notable conservatives who stood up against fascism vocally and strongly. Figures like Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Germany or Winston Churchill in the UK. The problem is that conservatives have a weakness. They are more afraid of the left and its radicalization than they are of the right. Exploit this weakness in order to form an alliance with traditional conservatives, which they then hollow out from the inside. Afraid of the left, conservatives form an uneasy partnership with fascists, thinking that they can control them. The result is always the opposite, which when they exhibit conservatives form an uneasy partnership with fascists, thinking that they can control them. The result is always the opposite, which means that most conservatives only end up becoming anti-fascists once they realize that it's already too late. I think that if ICE started rounding up queer people into concentration camps, you would see a lot of conservatives in the United States hiding queer people beneath their floorboards. But what those conservatives probably would not like to admit is that they were so afraid of phantom threats like wokeness or leftist radicalism or cultural Marxism, which, by the way, is literally a Nazi dog whistle invented by Joseph Goebbels, than they are of rising radicalism and violence on the right. Conservatives have a tendency to support and even vote for fascists out of fear from the left, and then turn around and claim that they had nothing to do with the rise of fascism in their countries.
I want to make a point here of adding that Democrats, liberals, also do the same thing.
And this is because they don't realize that fascism is a process of radicalization rather than an end state.
Are you listening? Fascism is a process of radicalization. So when I said in 2017 that Donald Trump wants to be the guy with the mustache, and people were like, well, it's not like he's leading us to gas chambers. It was like, hello, because it's a process.
It is about the consolidation of a cult of unity and national purity through coercion, mass mobilization, and militarism. This is why when conservatives echo the Great Replacement theory, talk about immigrants as invaders, and obsess over internal enemies who are corrupting the purity of the nation, they don't often realize that they are explicitly echoing fascist talking points.
So I hope that that helped give you a much clearer understanding of what fascism is and how far from being a communist fascism Donald Trump is. Okay. Now, I think there's also something that needs to be very clearly clarified is that Democrats in the United States are 1,000% an active participant in fascism and have allowed for it to advance. Okay? This is the basic facts. Your boy Obama just re-upped. He said him and Michelle just re-upped on a scholarship program they have to create new leaders in America that partners with the CEO of Airbnb, who is a known loud Zionist. Airbnb has Airbnbs on stolen Palestinian land in the West Bank. That's the person that y'all keep wanting to raise up. And what does new leaders even mean? Leaders of what? And I know that people will say, well, why are you always talking about them? Because they always say that. But again, I will say because they serve two purposes. That's why they were used. They're not just Democrats, they're Black. And their identity has been used to advance establishment politics that upholds the undergirding that allows for fascism to grow and grow and grow and grow. I talk about this a lot with Brianna Greyjoy. I just did her podcast. We had a lovely, lovely time. And these conversations have to continue to happen. They have to continue to be expounded upon. That's what was so great about what took place at the summit, at the AmandaLand summit this weekend, was that I feel like we got to have real conversations about not just theory, but about action, right? Not just about vision, but about planning. And these are the things that have been missing, because Claudia de la Cruz said something very important. She said, for everything that happened after the 60s, for everything that happened after Black Lives Matter, BLM in 2020. Did you know that we haven't built any structural moments for this? What structural platforms did we create that came out of that? Someone just said Mark Lamont Hill is hosting Holocaust Harris on her redemption tour at Uncle Bobby's. I didn't know that. I will address that with him privately. It is, I hope the dots are coming closer and closer for y'all. Because that's what the work is that we do here. We bring the dots closer and closer. And when we do that, I hope it brings us closer and closer to what our goals and missions and practices are. And I hope that you're getting new ideas for how to resist, how to raise resistance children, how to raise your ability to resist. I want you to help to be able to understand these things, because there's certain realities that are gonna slap you in your face. Like I said, life comes at you fast.
Amanda.